it seems the game is just using normal shadow maps, and I get it. They're already doing RTGI and reflections. I wasn't gonna sit here and expect ray trace shadows in addition to that, right?
Right.
So maybe Alex, I don't know. Why don't you take us through the shadows a bit?
Yeah, sure. So, like John said, I think this is just you can only add so much ray tracing to a title on a PS5, and I think this is a very reasonable area to not add them in because direct shadows with shadow maps can be pretty all right for most cases. But there's just some clear examples of it that I wanted to call out just to like say, oh, this is it, and I think that's why. Like one of the smaller things that you can notice is that like at shot at 142, this is not the primary thing that the camera's looking at in this scene, but there's some furniture in the background and there's like little round handles on them. What you'll see in games that use shadow maps is that the shadow map will be disconnected from the object that it is actually casting the shadow. This is a pretty common thing, and you can see it right there in the background on those little handles.
Good catch.
You can also see at some points, I mean, you can just look through the trailer. There is some shadow aliasing. It's actually not that bad. It's actually really good. I'd say that the shadows are really well filtered, and I think they're percentage closer soft shadows that they have ever since Red Dead Redemption 2 have looked great. So I don't think that's actually going to be a big problem in the game. One thing that I did notice, though, is that there are some non-shadow casting lights, and it'll be remain to be seen exactly what that means for gameplay. But they actually do sneak into these cutscenes as well, too. Like when he's talking to what is, I think, a bailiff, a person who works at the jail, who's that in that like little windowed area with the microphone and everything in front of them and the keyboard. All those like keyboard, spiral notebook, mouse, etc.
Oh yeah,
they're not shadow casting at all, even though there's a direct light on them, and that's like just normal stuff. No, that's actually probably the worst looking shot in the entire trailer. But yeah, like there's a that's just something like there's going to be limits to how many like shadow casting lights a game can have. RTGI cannot cover direct lighting on such a small level if it's not sampling it. So there's going to be limits there. And that's just like one thing I wanted to call out. But otherwise, I actually thought the shadows looked really great in most scenes, especially when we get to characters, which we'll talk about soon.
Yeah, I think the shadows here on characters in particular, and again, these directed sequences look really good. They're very high resolution. There are some signs also of that kind of variable penumbra effect we saw in RDR2 and in GTA 5, in its most recent iteration at least, like at 40 seconds. That's a pretty clear as day shot there with the pedestrians who are walking by, right around their feet, super sharp towards their head, that shadow area, very diffuse. So that's kind of a nice thing to see, and it does look very good there. But like Alex said, we see some low-res shadows on buildings in particular. You notice some shadow aliasing in some of those areas around the game. And you also do notice some examples where maybe we're seeing some cutscene only tech possibly, like at 33 seconds, you can see two shadows cast from the character's hand. Now that would be pretty expensive with shadow maps. I presume that would just be a flourish for cutscenes, and then in-game, if you're like fiddling with a cash register, that's not going to be casting multiple shadows. Although actually in Red Dead Redemption 2, I think you could get up to two shadow maps coming from different light sources in the scene at the same time. So
yeah.
But yeah, I would expect there are some flourishes here for the cutscenes, and I would expect those ultra crisp, super high resolution shadows that are used for the characters here. Probably that's going to be more of a cutscene flourish, and in gameplay I would expect maybe a little bit lower, but you probably wouldn't notice it too much. Like that would be a pretty sensible optimization, I think.